Good afternoon. Welcome to the PMICS Education Subcommittee's first Technical Bite presentation. My name is Chelsea Townsend, and I'm the chair of the PMICS Education Subcommittee and the director of the South Carolina Prescription Monitoring Program. Today, we are thankful to have Kevin Borcher presenting on ASAP Through the Years, A Journey to Version 5.0. Kevin is the Senior PDMP Specialist at the Institute for Intergovernmental Research and PDMP TTAC. So thank you, Kevin, for presenting for us today, and the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Chelsea, and thank you for having me present on this. What I'm going to talk about is a review or refresher on the American Society for Automation in Pharmacy's standard format through the years, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. I do have to provide a disclaimer that this presentation was funded through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Starting off with going back in the ASAP history, it originated in 1995. And for some of you on the call, this is brand new information. You may be a new PDMP admin, or you may have been around for several years. But just to give you a little bit of history on where ASAP has been. Once again, this started with version 3.0 in 2005, and Massachusetts was the very first state to implement this. Over the years, there have been several versions that have been released. The most recent one is in 2023 that was created, ASAP version 5.0. We've reviewed all the current ASAP versions by state. This is just a graphical representation as of July of 2025 on which states have been using which version. This may have already changed in some states as of July, but it's been accurate and up to date as of then. You can see that it is a mixture. There is one state, and we'll talk about that, using 5.0 currently, and several other states are using various versions. Going through the ASAP 5.0 major milestones that have occurred to give people an understanding of how did ASAP 5.0 get to where it is. We originally, and by me saying we, I was involved with Bill Lockwood, the executive director of ASAP, in developing or facilitating the newest ASAP 5.0 standards. We elicited stakeholder solicitation from a multitude of groups, including pharmacy software vendors, the PDMP vendors, and talking with a lot of different PDMPs. In May of 2022, there was a webinar hosted by PDMP TTAC to go over some of the steps to prepare and how we were trying to get support from the stakeholders on the development of 5.0. These meetings did occur. There were 4 meetings that occurred over a period of several months, and these included about 20 to 25 PDMP administrators, most if not all of the PDMP vendors, and several pharmacy software vendors. And outside of the meetings, there was a lot of solicitation of getting input and feedback on what do these stakeholders, once again, PDMP administrators, the PDMP vendors, and the pharmacy software vendors, what would you want to see in this version that would make it more beneficial? And ASAP has always been supportive of what the PDMPs wanted. So there was a lot of encouragement for PDMPs to respond and provide input into this. In March of 2023, ASAP 5.0 was published with a caveat that it was not to be used until January of 2024. And that date occurred to allow the vendors, both PDMP vendors and pharmacy software vendors, to work on their development. January is a bad time for any type of PDMP changes to occur because the pharmacy software vendors may have a lot of other options on their plate that they have to prioritize. But that gave plenty of time for some of that to occur. NASCA hosted a webinar with Bill Lockwood from ASAP in April of 2023 to explain some of the changes that had occurred. In May of 2024, there was an addendum released just with some cleanup and some changes, minor changes that were identified, and then that was published. And then February of 2025, there was a minor update posted that made some changes to a couple of fields based on PDMP feedback and their databases. So ASAP 5.0 has been out there for, once again, January of 2024 to be implemented. Nebraska was the first state to implement ASAP 5.0. They have not required it, but the last word is that all of the vendors are submitting in 5.0 where they used to be in 4.2a. Who's planning on implementing? Based on an NCPDP call in September of 2025, we have a list of the states that have identified themselves as planning on implementing ASAP 5.0. Maryland, Illinois, Ohio, Utah, Kentucky, South Carolina, Michigan, Alaska, Nevada, and Oklahoma have all expressed the interest or the planning to implement ASAP 5.0, which may occur in 2025 or most likely 2026 at this point. Going into the ASAP 5.0 guide, there have been a lot of changes. 5.0 was one of the most extensive updates to the ASAP versions over the years. As you can see on this graph, ASAP 4.2a has 101 fields. In 4.2b, there was one change, and that was to the PRE segment to add the state or jurisdiction of the state license number of the provider, the prescriber. And you can see in the far right column, ASAP 5 increased from the 102 fields in 4.2b to 146 new fields. And there were some changes with those as well. So you can see the information source had 5 new fields. The PHA or pharmacy header had 15. The DSP or dispensing record had the most at 36. And then AIR appears to have 29 new fields. What this did, and we'll explain it a little bit later, is duplicated and cleaned up some of those fields for the person picking up or dropping off. The major recurring themes that we've seen within 5.0 that came from the stakeholders is having data completeness, having compliance with the data, and integrity, having good, solid data with fewer errors. Patient matching was also a major theme within this. There was some new information regarding the patient name and the patient address. There were new fields regarding either opioid treatment programs or adding qualifiers to existing fields so that pharmacy software vendors could identify the prescription, the dispense record may have come from an opioid treatment program or narcotic treatment program. There was also clarification with a qualifier on whether the prescription was a medical marijuana or CBD record. And there was some expansion regarding veterinary dispensing. Optionality was existing within previous ASAP versions, but in alignment with national standards and formats such as HL7, Health Level 7, or the National Council for Prescription Drug Programs, NCPDP, trying to align more with that optionality on whether a field was required, optional, or situational. And different states have in the past used their own guidelines for some of this optionality, either something similar to RR in that field posted in their guides, meaning this was a state-specific field and not necessarily that required in ASAP, whichever version you're using, and has been used sometimes to say not required. And then we've seen other fields such as P expressed within state guides as well. Going through each of the headers or segments, we'll start off with the IS or information source to give everyone an idea of where this is. This may help with PMIX too on determining what is going to be expressed in the future with PMIX. IS04 was a new field, and this identifies the pharmacy dispensing software vendor. It provides additional information for clarification for PDMPs if they need to reach out to the vendor, if they know which vendor that is. IS05 is also a new field associated with IS04 and provides a phone number from that dispensing vendor so that PDMPs have a better way to contact them. The PHA or pharmacy header had some clarifications on PH02, removing the language in the header name of NABP, since the provider ID is now identified through NCPDP. PHA 14 is the dispenser or pharmacy type. This was a new field and provides additional clarification for PDMPs to understand what type of dispenser that is. PHA 15 is a new field to identify in very simple yes or no. Is this a mail order pharmacy? Starting to get into the PAT or patient information segment, there was a lot of review going on to try to align with national organizations or federal agencies. And with patient name, and we'll talk about patient address as well, trying to align with some of that. In this case, for patient name, the American Health Information Management Association, or AHIMA, which had published a framework for HL7 for EHRs and really any organization or agency to have more standardization on the data elements provided for that standardization. One of the recommendations has been to report the patient's complete legal name on a government-issued ID. Do not put in extraneous information or comments within the patient name. Sometimes you may see something where it'll say in the patient's first name or last name field, leave prescription in screen door or beware of dog. And that information makes patient matching that much more difficult. So cleaning up that. Also, not reporting special characters other than a hyphen to keep that cleaner. That you may have pharmacy software vendors and PDMP vendors that can help do some of this cleanup. But once again, trying to have standardization and consistency with national organizations and federal agencies makes it a lot cleaner. Patient address was very similar to this. There were some changes and recommendations similar to following or aligning anyway with HEMA's framework. The ONC, Office of National Coordinator for Health IT, now known as Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy, ONC, ASTP, ONC, published a Project USA technical specification in which they identified the proper words, the proper language, the proper identifications of street names, states, and other abbreviations. So all of this aligns with federal agencies and a specification guide that was published by them. PAT02 and PAT05 added a new qualifier to identify the Medicaid recipient ID number, which can help in some cases with patient matching. And then in PAT21, working on expanding the qualifiers on the patient location code, whether they are homeless or transients, whether it is potentially an animal that's on a farm or a zoo or even a circus or traveling show. More fields that were either added or modified in ASAP 5.0 was patient gender. Some states requested to expand upon that. Also, new fields in PAT 24 and 25 to identify a patient preferred or alias first or last name. Some patients may get married, divorced, remarried, and if there's a way to associate those names with the current one, that makes it a little bit easier for patient matching as well. Also adding PAT 26, patient race category, and PAT 27, patient ethnicity, which follows USCDI or CDC standards. There were some changes to veterinary patients to be able to better understand what not only if the prescription is for a veterinary patient, but what the species may be. And between PDMP, TTAC, and NASCA, a document was published in 2021 to look at recommended best practices. And some of those included showing the owner's name and date of birth for an animal. Some of this we know may be state specific. States may have their own choices on how they identify this, and these were just the best practices that states may address and accept. PAT 28 includes the veterinary species code. And then PAT 29 has a little bit more information for that animal location code. Getting into the dispense record, the DSP segment, this was increased for the fill number from 2 digits to 4 digits. DSP 07, the product ID qualifier, included a qualifier for cannabis in this case. Time fields had been modified as well. The stakeholders, primarily the vendors, had asked if there could be some clarification on this. So everything should be reported in Coordinated Universal Time or UTC, which helps standardize that, understanding where that prescription was. Maybe it was mail order, maybe it was crossing state lines where a time zone changes, and that can be better understood. And there were some new fields added. All of those included DSP 26, the time written, DSP 27, the time filled, and DSP 28, the time sold, which also are associated with the date fields with those. DSP 12, the transmission form or original code, there may be some new qualifiers that will be discussed in the future. One is for telehealth. DEA has passed some regulations in January of 2025, and some of this may help PDMPs better understand where that prescription originated from. DSP 29 and DSP 30, this was requested by PDMPs to include the total quantity remaining on a prescription to help with calculations. And these align with DSP 09 and DSP 11. Also, those fields are 11 digits with a decimal point in between because we're getting more and more liquids and some of those doses may be very small. So this helps to better clarify that. Payment type has always been a challenge between PDMPs and the pharmacy software vendors. For the software vendors to identify what type of payment it came from, especially if it was from a discount card, sometimes in-house and sometimes a national discount card. So working between ASAP, the PDMP stakeholders, and the software vendor stakeholders, new fields were expressed and identified to clarify, uh, is the prescription from a discount card, yes or no? Now, we also know and understand that there may be multiple types of payment for a prescription. So that information can be used in DSP 34, which can supplement DSP 16. And once again, similar to DSP 31 for a discount card, was an additional payment type used as a discount card. DSP 34 was added because of additional qualifiers or understanding for DEA schedules, or many cases state designated schedules to have cannabis. You can include the DEA schedule or a state schedule. You can also have a drug of concern listed. So all of that was added. DSP 35 and DSP 36 would include the name or the initials of the pharmacist. And this field was moved from the AIR segment to fill in the DSP. So it's more likely to see the pharmacist have that information in the DSP than the AIR segment. Getting into the PRE or prescriber information segment, PRE 09, the XDEA number was decommissioned. It is no longer used due to changes in Congress from 2023. There were new fields added in the prescriber information, specifically around prescriber address. And this can help PDMPs better identify which prescriber, if there are similar names, because you can see the address. It also helps in support of the Support Act from 2018 that was requiring location of the prescriber and not specifically talking about the address. It does help to identify that. Also, those fields are aligning once again with the ONC Project USA. AIR, or the Additional Information Reporting segment, was one of the most expansive in ASAP 5.0. There was initial changes to the qualifiers that around the person dropping off, picking up, or if it was mailed or shipped. And these were split to identify between AIR 13 to 19 versus AIR 20 to 23. So AIR 06 was describing the person picking up the prescription. There were some changes to this field in February of 2025 based on request and feedback from PDMPs. Prior to that, in the original ASAP 5.0, 01 as the qualifier was the parent or legal guardian. And in 4.2b and prior, 01 was the patient. And that was reverted back to 01 being the patient. AIR 03, as I had mentioned, I'm sorry, AIR 23, the person dropping off, mirrors those qualifiers in AIR 06. Talking briefly about some of the changes since ASAP 5.0 was released, there was an addendum in May of 2024 that addressed some field length changes in both TP02 and TT02. It changed the field length of AIR 30, and it revised those qualifiers in AIR 06 and AIR 23, once again from February of 2025. So what lies ahead with ASAP and 5.x? There have been a couple of requests already. One is to review the appendices and address any changes that may need to be done with country codes as well as state codes. There were some changes to the field length of the state codes in a prior version that was decreased from field length of 10 down to a field length of 2, and that is standardized now with ONC Project USA technical specifications. But I think that the appendices will be reviewed, and if there's any feedback from PDMPs or other stakeholders, it would be a good time in the near future to talk about that. I had mentioned earlier about telehealth, and we'll see what other changes may or may not occur with the DEA regulations. But PDMPs may want to know if that prescription originated as a telehealth prescription. And then what else is on the horizon? Well, a lot of that is really up to the PDMPs and groups such as NCPDP or the pharmacy software vendors, PDMP vendors, or PMICs or NASCA on what other fields would you like to see in an upcoming version. I can't say when the next version will be released. Typically, it's 3 to 5 years between versions. Once again, ASAP 5.0 was able to be published and implemented as soon as January 2024. If there are changes that are identified by PDMPs, I would suggest that starting to compile a list of what you would like to see to improve your data, to improve that quality, that integrity, and completeness of data. Now, if you do have any changes or you're interested in what's going to happen beyond ASAP 5.0, you can contact Bill Lockwood, the Executive Director of the American Society of Automation and Pharmacy directly. I have his email here. You can also reach out to PDMP TTAC, and we'll be glad to get that information to ASAP. So with that, I appreciate your time today. If there are any questions, Chelsea, I believe that you may have had some.
Yes. So one of the questions is that do you think a new version will be fast-tracked if federal legislation around telehealth comes down the pipeline? I know that the DEA legislation around telehealth has kind of been pending for a couple of years. However, do you think that there's a potential that a new version could be released prior to that 3 to 5 year timeline if some federal legislation comes down that requires telehealth to be tracked?
My opinion is that ASAP can be very flexible and nimble if there are changes that need to be made. And they have been in the past, and I would feel that there would be opportunities to fast track or to have a newer version 5.1 or 5.0A or whatever that would happen to be. I do think it could be done.
Okay, perfect. And then out of all the fields that you listed and all the changes, which ones do you feel are most valuable to PMP administrators?
I think you'll get different answers from different people. What I have focused on in the past routinely is patient matching and having complete and accurate information for the patient. If you can't have the proper patient merged or matched together. That makes it difficult. That information within the PDMP then becomes less reliable or questionable. And you want your providers and maybe your PDMP epidemiologists and analysts to have the most complete and accurate information. So I've always focused on the patient segment, PAT.
Okay, perfect. And then for states looking to implement 5.0, are there any recommendations that you would have for states looking to consider new fields?
I would talk with internally what maybe your analysts or epidemiologists may use. I would be in contact with other PDMPs through organizations such as PIMIX, NASCA, NCPDP. I would talk to your pharmacy software vendors and your PDMP vendors. They're all stakeholders in this and they play a part. And the more buy-in and support you can get from all of the stakeholders would mean a more successful implementation.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us today and doing this presentation for the PIMIX Education Subcommittee. Thank you, NASCA, for hosting the presentation, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.